I'm so delighted to welcome our first astronaut onto the Polymath World channel, first of many, Dorothy Metcalf-Lindenberger, who I first met a few years ago on a program with ISET with Chris Barber, who we'll also be speaking to later on. She came to my town. She's spoken a lot of my schools. She met my daughters. My daughters think she's a rock star because astronauts are rock stars in their own way. And my one of my daughters even did her homework project on inspirational women on Dottie. So it's great to have you here again. So wonderful to see you, and thanks for spending your time with us today.
Well, thank you so much, Sam, for inviting me. And it's a pleasure to join and talk about the opportunity I have to be an astronaut, and then also what I continue to love to do, which is give back to my community and talk to them about our spaceship Earth that we are trying to protect.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm familiar with your story, but I'd love for everyone else to know all about your childhood and how you became an astronaut. So why didn't you start from the very beginning? What inspired you to want to do what you did?
Yes, well, it's about the third grade that I really wanted to start being an astronaut because I had two parents that were educators. My mom had been a high school math teacher, and my dad, a middle school science teacher, who then went on to work for the computer company Hewlett Packard. And they would take us to the museums, planetarium. And of course, in the late 70s, early 80s, we were getting new information back about our solar system because of finally being able to send probes out into the solar system. And that was coming to the planetarium. So that was really exciting to me. And then in 1981 is the first space shuttle launch, and I was a first grader, so I'm starting to watch on television the space shuttles. In 1983, when I was a third grader, Sally Ride became the first American woman to fly in space. And as a little girl, that's a big deal, right? To see, oh, women can also be astronauts. That same year, the movie The Right Stuff came out, and my parents had taken me to see that. That is about the Mercury 7 astronauts. And so the combination of those two things just really inspired me to be an astronaut, but I also wanted to be a lot of things at that age. So I wasn't really sure, like, how do you actually become an astronaut, which is it was important to be able to understand. So my parents just emphasized, well, you got to keep, working hard, studying, doing all your academic classes. So that's what I did in middle school. And then it was in ninth grade, which is now high school in the US, but at the time was still part of the junior high system, that I went to Huntsville, Alabama. So I got to leave Colorado and go on an airplane to space camp. And at that week at space camp was amazing. We did, of course, rocket launches and pretended like we were astronauts in simulators. So I got to be a mission specialist scientist for a mission. And then also we served on mission control. So I helped with that and really enjoyed my position. I remember part of it was like I had to give them weather clearance and then launch clearance. So that was all very exciting. And we also were learning about the Hubble Space Telescope because in April of 1990, the vehicle Discovery carried Hubble into orbit. So when I came home from camp, I was now clear on what I needed to study. That was another big piece of being at camp, is hearing from engineers and scientists right next door at the Marshall Space Flight Center. So I was very clear on what I now needed to do to work at NASA. So I also built the model of Discovery when I came home because I just was so excited about this opportunity to have gone to camp and to learn about Hubble. So I followed then in high school, and I did stay involved in science clubs, and I took all my STEM classes and more that I needed. And I just continued to be an athlete. I was a cross country runner and track runner and also a swimmer. And then I applied to go to college away from Colorado in Washington State at a smaller school where I could get attention and also have opportunities like internships. So after high school, I went to Whitman College, and I did just that. 2 summers I spent as a geology student out doing geology, which is really critical to understand how it works. So one summer I was outside of Yellowstone, and another summer I was back in Colorado, and both were very different types of geology experiences. And then in 1997, when I was getting ready to graduate and prepare for next steps, I had this clear plan. I had been hired to work for the Peace Corps and go teach English abroad for 2 years. And I knew that that would give me time to look at graduate schools and also to make a little bit of money to pay for graduate school. And I also wanted to see the world. I wanted to understand more than the United States. So I was really looking forward to this opportunity. But as I tell students, a lot of times there's much more in our lives that we're not in control of. And unfortunately, this happened to me where the country I was assigned to go to, Kazakhstan, was suddenly deemed unstable because of the conflict that it had when pulling away from Russia. And so I was left without a job. And I also was not going to graduate school because you would have had to apply months earlier and found someone to do research with. So that was really disappointing. It was really hard for me. But I pivoted. It took a few months. I actually volunteered and stayed in my parents' house for a few months. I volunteered at my local school with the cross country team and with my old coaches. And then I decided, okay, well, if I'm not going to teach with Peace Corps, I would like to teach in the United States, and I'll specifically teach science. So I went back for just a 1-year certification course to become a high school science teacher. So I did. I was a high school science teacher in Vancouver, Washington. And I created an astronomy class because I had several students who were not passing their normal classes. So I wanted to make sure we helped them graduate from high school and capture their science credits. And in that astronomy class, I had a curious student ask a really important question, which is, how do you use the space shuttle toilet, or how do you go to the bathroom in space? Which happens to be a very popular question for astronauts to get from students. I didn't know this as a teacher, so I looked up the question on the internet. Of course, I got the answer and found it on the NASA website. And also I found out that they were hiring teachers as part of the 2004 class of astronauts. And I couldn't believe it. They were hiring teachers to become astronauts. I really had to apply. So that's exactly what I did. I went through the process of the application, and then I waited, and it would be months before I would get the letter back that I could even go further in the process. So then I did that. And finally, in November of 2003, I went down with a group of 35 other astronaut candidates. And some were, pilots, engineers, doctors, scientists, and then a few of us were teachers. And they had 5 total cohorts. So we were the last cohort to go through of the interview process. And it was an amazing experience. And then out of that, again, I got to wait. I waited about 6 months until April of 2004, when I got the call in my classroom that they wanted to hire me as one of the astronauts that was also a teacher. So that's how I became an astronaut.
Would you mind just briefly explaining for us Brits and for everyone else listening who's not familiar what Space Camp is and the kind of opportunity that presents?
Yeah, Space Camp is a week-long camp for different ages, but specifically I was with high school students because mine was an academy piece. And during the day, we do a lot of hands-on activities and also work in simulators that are they're modeled after the simulators used at NASA. And in the days I was there was a shuttle simulator, And then there was also the Mission Control Center. Now they've made like an International Space Station and a Mars Moon habitat simulator and less on a shuttle since those are retired. But yeah, we did lots of hands-on things to help us understand rocketry, propulsion, and then of course the simulations, which are a couple hours. And you swap like one day you get to be an astronaut, about half your group, and then the other half is mission control, and then you swap positions. We also go to a large swimming pool. Now on site, they actually have their own pool, but at the time they didn't. And we built like a satellite in the pool, much like astronauts build in the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory in Houston. They build and work on the space station. So just a really great way to learn and think about how we teach people to go to space, but also how we operate in space. And it was wonderful too, because you're with a cohort of students that all have the same interest and passion as you, which in the classroom doesn't always happen. So it was a really special camp for me.
I remember seeing the movie Space Camp when I was much younger, with a young Tate Donovan and Kelly Preston in it. And I always wondered what it was and thought, is this just a movie or is this an actual real thing?
No, it's real. Yeah.
Yeah. And for what ages exactly? What's the youngest you could be to take part in Space Camp?
Boy, they have day camps. So I know, like, I took my daughter even when she was around 7. So I think they have day camps for your younger student where they don't spend an overnight. But I think around the 4th grade is when you can start going the full week-long camp. They also have family camps, and then they don't cap the highest age, because they even had one time when I was there doing a talk, they had a 100-year-old woman come through. So she was just there for a day tour and day camp. But yeah, it's from pretty young to indefinite age.
That's just so valuable, and you and I are both very fond of ISET and the work they do in all over the world, and just giving young people these opportunities to really be inspired into STEM subjects, which I know is a huge part
Absolutely.
of your life. Yeah. So you inadvertently, through looking for the answer to the question about the toilet, found that NASA wanted to hire. And then found your opportunity there. That's perfect timing. So how long was the gap between your selection and flying on STS-131?
So I was hired in 2004, and then 6 years later, I flew in space in 2010.
And what sort of things were you doing in between?
Well, initially, there's a big chunk of training that all astronaut candidates go through. Ours was about a year and a half, maybe a little over. Now it's upwards of 2 years for astronauts, because they combine more of what we could separate out during the shuttle days, such as robotic training and spacewalk training. They now combine all of that, because you have to have that skill set to be an International Space Station astronaut. I did get to do all of that training later, but just not in the initial. So for a year and a half, you're with just your classmates most of the time. You're learning not only about how to operate safely and in a manner that comes out of aviation. So we do a lot of flying in airplanes, but also you're also learning about NASA so that you can communicate it to the public. So we travel to all of our centers around the United States and meet with them, get a chance to take tours and learn about what they're doing at those centers, so that, again, yes, so we can communicate it. And also it helps us in our understanding of what all goes into building safe, reliable space vehicles and conducting amazing science, not only at the space station, but of course out in our solar system.
Yeah, and did you have a favorite part of the training? Was there a particular aspect of it you enjoyed the most?
Definitely my favorite part of training was learning how to fly in the T-38 jet. That will become our training vehicle for use almost once a week while we're astronauts. It's we talk about the cockpit and the vehicle, understanding a vehicle that you're going to fly in as an astronaut is really important. Of course, the primary vehicle right now is the International Space Station, and then people are getting there in various ways. But understanding those vehicles and then also understanding and building a scan pattern that's a habit pattern so that when different things arise, either stressors or actual risks. So, for example, in an airplane, of course, a real risk would be to run out of fuel or to have really a bad experience with the vehicle itself, like having to shut down an engine or losing an engine. So those are real risks with the plane. Weather can be a significant risk. So we learn how to help either mitigate those or make sure that they don't happen, like that we're taking care of all the necessary things. And then the stressors, sometimes the heat in Houston can be a real stressor in the cockpit because you have to wear long sleeve Nomex uniforms. Oftentimes the controllers are trying to help you out, but they're not always hearing and they don't know what you're going through. So they can bother you at times, or they can just not answer because they're busy. And so you learn how to deal with stressors, and that's like everyday life, but in a real risk environment. So I really loved learning how to fly in the jet. We get to do aerobatics, which does help us for space. It's important to pull more than Earth's gravity, so pull more than 1 G to be prepared for space. And we can pull up to 5 Gs without a G suit in the T-38. So that's really incredible. And then we also do formation flying. So learning how to, again, build those scan patterns in a real risk environment when you're approaching the other plane and holding a position with them and using that outside cues to monitor. And so it's just really awesome to fly in an airplane.
I can imagine. Do you still fly much today? Oh.
I don't, so I don't put my hands on the controls like today because I don't have a plane nearby to get into. I did get to go in a glider recently, just a few months ago, and that was a super awesome experience. But I never got my private pilot's license, so I don't fly in a plane that way. Of course, I fly as a passenger.
Great. Once you're assigned to your flight, your first flight on STS-131, how long was the period between being assigned and flying with your team?
We, again, about a year and a half. Well, initially, it was going to be just a year because we had the skill sets, but you don't control when your vehicle actually launches, and ours had to slip to the right a couple of months. And that's okay because that gives us more time to train together. And I loved our crew, so it was just awesome to be able to keep training and not have to pick up other jobs in the office. So yeah, we trained for a little bit longer and then we flew. We were assigned in 2008 and then of course flew in 2010.
And that was quite a busy period. You're trying to finish the construction of the International Space Station, and it's also the last few flights of the shuttle.
Yes.
And I believe yours was the last night launch. Now everyone loves night launches. What was it like launching on the space shuttle and launching at night?
Yes, well, we had a huge sleep shift, so we were getting up at noon. And that was we were getting up at noon because then, and so that was very strange to make that big of a sleep shift. And actually, I want to now say, I think we were actually getting up at 8 at night because it was a very big sleep shift. So, and then we were launching at 6 in the morning. And so by getting up at 8, that started our day. We were eating breakfast around midnight. And then we knew we'd be getting out to the vehicle right around our like midday or early midday, and then launching at about lunchtime. So it was beautiful, but it was odd because for example, while you're in quarantine, you're trying to exercise and kind of keep like a normal pattern, which helps your body. And we also know, I mean, I had worked on many flights beforehand as a family escort, and we know that a lot of flights slip or they don't even go and you have to fly back to Houston. So you're trying to keep this sleep shift while also staying in shape and just kind of keeping relaxed. And so trying to exercise like late at night was a little bit crazy, but we had great trainers that worked with us, and they'd ride the bicycle by us like while we'd be jogging in the dark. And the day of course, so we get up around 8 o'clock at night and we're eating our breakfast, and then we take the the Airstream van, that silver van, out to the launch pad, and it's a just quite the journey because you've watched others do it, but you know, until you actually get to go in it, there's just very few people that get to go out to the launch pad, and it's really cool and a little bit surreal. And so with the darkness, it's just kind of like the vehicle is the beaming light out there, and everything else is just in darkness. So it's really beautiful. I'm the last person that was loaded into the vehicle as mission specialist 2. So it gave me a chance to reflect while I was waiting to be called to get loaded inside, and to really look back at across the river and think about my family, my teachers, my friends that were all there to watch this launch, and really think about how grateful I was for the opportunity to represent all of them, because I couldn't have done it without their support, their instruction, and just just all the guidance over the years. So it was a really special early morning.
I bet. And I've seen the videos of your launch, and you're sat there and you're punching the air,
Yes.
like it's Christmas morning, like the happiest, most amazing day of your life. I'm amazed you're even able to sleep the night before. I don't think I'd have been able to sleep at all. But there you are. You're launching on the shuttle, and the shuttle launch itself, I've heard people say it's the most fun they've ever had, and people say it was violent, you know, shaking, wondering if it was going to hold together. What was the experience like for you?
Well, it's definitely the initial punch in the back is startling, and probably the first minute is just a combination of knowing exactly what you've practiced to do and making sure you're really seeing those things on screens and on gauges. And then also this stressor, like this is why we train in airplanes, this stressor of the environment actually being super dynamic, which it's not in the simulators. And so there's a couple times as a crew we giggled because we're just like, wow, this is a lot of energy. We feel the energy, but we also recognize we have a job and that this is really critical flight time. So keeping that awareness too, which is why we practice launches over and over and over in the simulator, so that it really is just this like complete scan that you do. But yeah, it's a lot of energy. Once the solids came off, once the solid rocket boosters come off, and you're just using the liquid hydrogen and oxygen, then it's a super smooth ride that kind of allows your brain to slow down a little bit. Not much, because there's still a lot you're monitoring, but just to kind of appreciate just for a few more minutes while it's just smooth. Then you start to pull the 3.5 Gs, and it's getting close to the main engine cutoff time. So you're monitoring a lot of things that need to happen at that period. And then it got actually very busy for me once the main engines cut off, because next to me, Mission Specialist 1 was Rick Mastracchio, and coming up from the mid deck with Stephanie, they needed to take a lot of photos overhead of the external tank. So in order to do that, they've got to take off gloves and helmets. And I'm like collecting up their gloves and helmets and making sure that they're not just floating away and getting in the way, while also backing up Dex and Jim as they set up for our next burn. We have to actually do a burn within about 40 minutes to circularize our orbit. So they're getting that set up. So it was really busy. I didn't have time to look out the window. I was just making sure that we're getting all the critical steps done together as a crew.
Gosh, yeah, I mean, there's so much we could talk about that first view out the window, and then all the jobs you had to do. But you're in space for a bit over 2 weeks, weren't you? And your main job, I believe, was to deliver the multi-purpose logistics module to the ISS.
That's right.
So how long did it take you to get to the ISS?
Well, we could get to the ISS much more quickly than we did, but because of safety, we use a 3-day to docking process. So the first day, you're getting into space, you got to get the vehicle set up from being the launch vehicle to a home. So we were doing that the first day. The second day, we do a set of robotic arm operations that took about 5 hours to take very detailed photos of all of our tiles and our wing leading edge. And then we're also getting set up for docking the next day. And then on the third day, we docked to the International Space Station.
Yeah. Yeah, it's poetic beauty for me that you flew on Discovery, given that you had made a model of it and you'd done your project on Hubble, which obviously it was launched on Discovery. Yeah, this must have all been very meaningful for you.
Oh, definitely. It wasn't until like as we were leading up to the launch that it started to kind of come together that I realized I had made the model of Discovery. At the time, I just thought, oh, I made this model of a shuttle. But my mom pointed out, she was like, Dottie, it's Discovery and you're flying on Discovery. So that then I was like, wow, that is really amazing, as a ninth grader. And literally it's almost 20 years to the day from building the model of Discovery to flying on the vehicle Discovery. It was April 1990 when I went to space camp, and it was April 2010 when I flew on Discovery.
That's amazing. That's absolutely wonderful. And the thing that people most remember your flight for was when you docked to the ISS, you've got 4 women in space. And I've seen that photo of the 4 of you, and it's brilliant because the hair's all floating around, and there's the 4 of you there, and you're from a couple of different agencies and backgrounds, and so
That's right.
were you thinking a lot about it, and was there a lot of press focus on the fact that you guys were making history?
No, we weren't thinking about it. In fact, I kind of didn't think about it until our commander Dex took the photo and said that, they were requesting this for back on Earth because we were setting this record. Obviously, our focus is to do the mission. And as I explained earlier, our flight moved a few months to the right. And this is why the record was able to happen, is that Tracy Caldwell Dyson had already launched to space on the Soyuz with her crew. Originally, that was going to happen after we were there, so we would have missed her, which I always like to credit then that the big deal is, and like what had inspired me was Sally Ride flying in space, is that we are hiring women at a much higher rate than we did in the past. In fact, today, it's almost 50-50 as our population is 50-50 roughly. So it's really quite amazing. So we weren't focused on that happening, but then because when they realized it would happen, then yes, Dex took that really great photo of the 4 of us. It is really special to me because we do come from different backgrounds, and even Naoko is from the Japanese Space Agency. And I think that just also shows like we are doing such a much better job of really hiring people that reflect our society. And we just happened to be the four women that were there. And then the press did pick up on that photo. And again, I just always tried to point out, well, this just happened because we were doing our job at the right time. I do see the significance, of course, and then again, it's pretty amazing to me that in my lifetime I went from being about a 9-year old watching Sally Ride fly in space to being a woman that sets this record, which I hope will fall soon. But just realizing that a lot had happened in those years in between and should have happened too.
Yeah, yeah, you're playing your part in history in what was a fantastic arc in history, and hopefully soon we can look forward to the first woman walking on the moon, leaving Earth orbit with the
Absolutely.
next Artemis launch, and maybe walking on Mars as well. Did you ever get to meet Sally Ride or speak with her?
Yes. After we did our initial astronaut candidacy training, Joe Acaba, Ricky Arnold, and myself went out to California for a National Science Teacher Association meeting. We were doing a presentation, and Sally Ride was there. Of course, at that time, she was living in California and had her program, Sally Ride Science. And so she was at the convention too, and she made a special point to come see us, which I thought was just really awesome. And so we have a couple of pictures of all of us together. And yes, it felt very full circle to actually, be inspired by her flying in space, but then for her to come to seek us out as those that would be carrying on the torch, right? Going on to space ourselves.
Yeah, and now you get to play your part in inspiring other boys and girls to pursue space as well in the same way that you were inspired. I believe you're in the Space Camp Hall of Fame now. Is that correct?
Yes, I was one of the founding folks that was announced way back in 2007 when just a few months after my daughter's birth.
That's amazing. That's just another one of those circles coming complete in your story, which I love. Um, Back to your time in space, I believe you did have a debris strike of some sort. Am I remembering that correctly? I think something happened on the way up, which was concerning. Do you recall that?
Um,
Um,
I don't recall that we had any debris strike. I mean, this is why we do our whole checkout with uh, the cameras on day two. Some things that did happen that we were not expecting. One, we did not have our KU band antenna
that's
working.
what I was thinking of.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
KU band antenna did not work, which is our high data rate and allows us to send all those photos that we took back to the ground to be analyzed by engineers. And so by not having that, we had to have workarounds. And the workaround was to stay docked to the space station longer and do our final checkout while docked. And then another thing that went not as planned was that on our spacewalk, we had a brand new ammonia tank that was being installed, and one of the bolts was not seating correctly. So we had to do a rework of that placement. We eventually got the ammonia tank in, we got it all connected, but it didn't go as we had planned in the coordination of our spacewalks, which changed our third spacewalk completely, which is fine. I mean, it's something that the ground is amazing. Our ground teams, this is why we need so many different teams. Our ground team just put together a brand new spacewalk that reprioritized all the things we needed to get done, and they sent it up and they coordinated us through it. And then we conducted that third spacewalk safely. And so, yeah, those were the two biggest things that didn't go as planned on our mission.
Were you involved a lot in helping support Clay Anderson and was it Rick Mastracchio who also did a spacewalk?
Yes,
Supporting
Rick.
them.
Yes. So I was their backup. And therefore, I didn't go outside to do the actual spacewalk, but I talked to them the 6 to 8 hours that they were outside, and I was talking to the ground too, working through this coordination. And yes, Rick and Clay were just wonderful. Both of them worked really, really hard on all three of those spacewalks.
Amazing. How did you find re-entry and coming back to Earth? What was that like?
Yes, and it's so I'm more involved, as in like I actually throw switches, and there's a lot more time that goes by when you're re-entering. And so it's not as dynamic, but it is very, I guess, eye-opening because you can actually see the glowing plasma outside your window and in the back camera. And then you start to see Earth, like see places on Earth. You've been seeing Earth, but now you're there. It's much closer. I remember Jim startled me for just a few seconds. He said, "Oh my gosh, the mountains are so close." And I thought he meant like, "Oh no, we've done something wrong." I was like, "What have we done wrong? I don't understand. We're like at the right." And then I realized, oh, it's just because we've been at such a high altitude and now we're much lower. And he's just impressed at how beautiful they are. And I was fine. But initially, the my, just kind of like, oh, what did we do? But yes, it's much more dynamic. And no, sorry, it's not as dynamic as the shaking, but it's more of the you're involved in the dynamic process. And there's a big time crunch between when you start to pick up Florida and see the coast to when you land. I mean, the time just feels like it compresses, even though it's a couple of minutes, but it goes by really fast.
When you did land, were you able to adjust pretty well, or did you need sort of help getting your balance? What was it like?
Well, I got sick because I was, again, our vestibular system, our balance system is a little off and it was warm and I was not used to that like warmth. Um, but, but everything adjusts pretty quickly. Our bodies are amazing and a little bit of hydration, gets you back going. Even though the problem was I was like overly hydrated, like we have to do this whole water salt load, and that just didn't agree with my body. So that's why that came back up. But then once a few hours later, I was fine. I actually danced with my daughter on the beach that night.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Wow, what a journey. And yeah, that was your first, that was your only space flight, but you then did a NEEMO mission. Um which I'm really interested in. Not enough people know about NEEMO, but you've got this extraordinary analog, basically an underwater lab. So
Yes.
you did a NEEMO mission, and you had responsibility over our British hero Tim Peake during that as well. So tell us a bit about your time on the NEEMO mission and what that was like, and how much you enjoyed it.
Yeah, we get assigned to NEEMO with a few months out so we can do some training in Houston before going to Florida, off the Florida Keys to do it. So back in Houston, we came together as a team and we met with our topside folks. These are going to be the people in a modified mission control working with us. And also there's engineers that are watching and they're getting feedback on potential tools and ways of operating in space. So our particular mission was going to a near Earth asteroid with the intention of, understanding more about near Earth asteroids and the early formation of our solar system, but also, the potential of maybe using resources from near Earth asteroids. So what type of tools will we want to use there? What type of protocols? How would we work there? That was kind of what we were investigating. So in Houston, we learned about the tools just like we do for real spacewalks. And then we went underwater, practiced using them a little bit so we would be familiarized with it. And then we got a chance to even go around in a rover just to like kind of put that in our thought processes, like what that would be like. And then we went to Florida later, so a couple of months later, and of course we do a little bit of familiarization diving before we actually do our final descent to go live in the habitat for the next 12 days. And we were basically outside every day doing the simulated spacewalk at a near Earth asteroid, checking out things from maybe using like climbers lines to go around an asteroid, like to jetpacks, and then also we brought in submersibles, and they were acting as a small spacecraft that would hold you in a position near an asteroid while your larger habitat is back a ways. And so in investigating all these things, I mean, it was just really awesome. The ocean is, of course, beautiful itself. I had done some ocean studies when I was in high school, so it was amazing to go back to reef environments and all the sea creatures that are there, and trying not to let them distract you while you actually are getting some really good science and engineering done. And of course, we did have a little fun though. One night we did do a night dive, which was just pretty amazing to get to see the bioluminescence, to get to see a very benign shark, and yeah, we live in a really beautiful spaceship, right, on Earth, and just being under the water, only 65 feet, so not very deep, but enough to have two atmospheres. So just a really awesome experience.
Yeah, what a terrific opportunity. It must have been wonderful and a really useful analog as well. A really terrific analog that NASA
Absolutely.
has there. Did you get to,
Yes.
because it was a near-Earth asteroid sort of simulation, did you get to use some of your geology skills sort of in the practice?
Little bit. I mean, most of it is just checking out tools and thinking through processes. But what I did point out to them a couple times is that if you train the astronauts to recognize differences, we can collect, like, as a geologist, I know what different things to collect that show differences in rocks as you're approaching perhaps different boundaries. So if you saw more gas bubbles in one area that have escaped, so now you've got more of a bubbly surface, but in another area you don't, you would want to have a sample of both of those two things. So it can be as simple as just talking textures with an astronaut to, if you give them more training, like we currently are doing with our Artemis crews, like taking them to Iceland and taking them to locations in Arizona and teaching them about rock formation and processes, then astronauts can be very good at picking out things too. So that was the only time I really talked about, what we did as geologists when I was a field geologist.
Yeah, I count the land. It wasn't that long ago, but the successful landing on the asteroid that passed. I think it was a few years ago now. I think that's one of the most amazing things humans have done in space. I mean, the video footage of that was really
Yes,
extraordinary.
and exactly. And then like getting returns from this has
Yeah.
been wonderful. So yeah, from Hayabusa to our other uh, collections and sample returns, it's pretty amazing what we've been able to do in our solar system.
That after a while you left active service with NASA and have moved on to other projects. And one of those is working with groups like ICET and doing educational outreach. Tell us a little bit more about what you've done since retiring from active duty with NASA.
Yeah, so I myself went back to school. I always did want to get higher degrees. So I did get my master's in geology, and I worked for a consulting firm for a while, about 6 years, doing what I like to say is cleaning up the messes I made, but doing remediation in soils and groundwater that help us have better, cleaner soils and groundwater so that we ourselves are not contaminated. And then I decided to go out on my own and kind of take that consulting from both geology and from space and combine it. And I do a lot more with education and also with adults as well. And I just really find it important to give back in my school areas, like, to go talk to young people around the world. I also do it sometimes through the government with our State Department and talking to universities, but helping people understand what we are doing in space. So, not just what we did, not just what I was a part of, but like what we're doing now and how we really need them involved. Even if they personally don't ever want to be an astronaut, there's so much science that gets done. And then there's so many other ways to be involved. So just really helping them see that bigger picture, I find to be really important.
Yeah, and you're so good at it. I really enjoyed the week and a half or so that we were working together with students. You just see the impact of what it does, the impact that it has on kids like my own kids. Um, it's crazy that it
Yeah.
was 15 years ago now. Do you find yourself looking up at the ISS going past any night and thinking, gosh, just yesterday I was up there myself?
It does feel, I mean, I do try to see the ISS when I can. It's challenging in Seattle. We have so much cloud cover
Yeah.
in the winter, which is an easier time to see it because of you really need to be able to see at dawn or dusk. In the summer, I would have to stay up a lot later, but it's really pleasurable. So the summer, I do tend to capture it more often, which is just amazing to see those passes. And it does now start to feel like, oh yeah, that was 15 years ago. It didn't used to. It used to feel so recent. But now when I look inside it, and watch crew members floating around, I know that enough of the volume of the space station has changed. And the tools that they're getting to use are pretty exciting to watch evolve and change. And even the spacewalks, a lot of things have stayed similar on the outside, but even the outside has had to change, new batteries, added solar arrays, et cetera, et cetera. So, it definitely is starting to feel more like 15 years ago.
Yeah, we've been talking to quite a few space scientists on this channel already, and it feels like space is changing quite quickly. But the shuttle is gone, and the ISS will be decommissioned in 5 to 10 years. But is there anything you're really excited about, or optimistic about, or hopeful about when you think about the near and distant future of spaceflight?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about us returning to the moon in a very different way. So the Artemis program, the fact that it is both a combination of agencies, like government agencies working together, and also the addition of commercial companies. So it's a more like how we work at the International Space Station, but it's even more so commercial. That's going to be very exciting. And I do want to see new people landing on the moon. And that I wasn't even alive when the first 12 men landed. So the fact that we're returning, but we're returning decades later, and there are a whole group of us that want to experience this and then to understand more about our moon, so that we can go on to Mars. So I am very excited about where we're headed with the Artemis program.
And thank you so much. If people want to find out more about you and what you're doing, or see any of your talks, where can they go?
Well, I have down in the corner, my name is, I go by Dottie ML. And so if you just do dottieml.com, all one, that's where you can find out more information about me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I really hope to see you again, perhaps on an ISET program, and would love to bring you back here to Britain again sometime as well. But thanks so much for giving your time to us today. Really appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks so much, Sam. Have a good rest of your day too.